Thanks, Jamie. Can I ask Cheryl to call for said and intimate any apologies, please?
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everyone. If I'll run through the student, if you can indicate your attendance, please. Councillor Graham Barton.
Yep, here, Cheryl.
Councillor John McGee.
Yep.
Councillor Ellen Friel.
I'm here, Cheryl, thank you.
Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay. Councillor Peter Maben.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor William Lennox.
Yeah.
Councillor Belly Crawford.
Yeah.
Councillor Neil Watts.
Hey, Cheryl, thank you.
Councillor Drew Filson.
Yep.
Councillor Jennifer Hogg.
I'm here, thank you.
Councillor Elaine Stewart.
Here, thanks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Cheryl. I'm going to move on to item 1 on the agenda, and that's declarations of interest. So, Councillor Crawford.
Chair, I'd like to make a wee statement here for myself, on behalf of myself and Neil Watts. In April 22, myself and Neil Watts were invited by the National Pride Group to attend an event in order to showcase future ideas and aspirations for the A-frame site, along with other community reps. As far as I'm aware, there were invited photographers and the press were also present at the event. In the interest of transparency, I understand concerns have been raised in regard to my voting decision at the last meeting, as both Neil and I sit in the planning committee. As a local councillor, I'm invited to events regularly. Attendance at this or any event does not affect any decision made at any planning meeting, nor do we give any indication to what way we're going to be planning. So that's just hopefully that helps folk.
David, you want to come into that?
Yeah, if I may, just for the record, on behalf of the committee, just to set out, as Councillor Crawford has stated, there was an event on the 2nd of May 2022 arranged by the applicant, which was simply to share the proposals with a range of local interested parties. Those invited included the Auchinleck Community Development Initiative, ACDI, the two community councils, the Ayrshire Chamber of Commerce, and specifically all councillor candidates at that time. Just to remind everybody that that was the last council election. The event was 3 days before the election. The legal position is if you are a councillor, you remain a councillor up to midnight or on the day before the election. And once the election takes place, there is a statutory meeting and all committees are repopulated. So anyone who was a councillor at that time and standing for re-election, even if they were on the planning committee, would not have known for certain whether or not they would be back in the planning committee if they were re-elected. And in Councillor Watt's position, he was not a councillor at that time, but he was a council candidate, and equally couldn't have known that he would be elected, far less that he would end up on the planning committee. I think more importantly, and the article was published both on the applicant's own website and on the Chronicle's website. I think the only difference is the one in the Chronicle's website has exactly the same supporting a statement with the as released, but has for balance also noted that there were also objections to it. What's fundamentally important is that this was only brought to our attention after the last committee last year. It was primarily in the context of a challenge to the role played by the Community Council in offering their support to this, which is a different matter that we don't need to explore today. And then in passing, it was noted that the two planning committee members happened to be in the photograph. For the record, I have that in front of me, and there are actually 5 councillors in that current councillors in the photograph, and actually 3 of them now sit on the planning committee. And I've had discussion with Councillor McGee as well, because following his appointment as vice chair, it's been clarified Councillor McGee was also in attendance. So what we have is 5 members who all responded to that request or invite to go and simply hear about the proposals. What we have is absolute confirmation from all present that none of those council candidates or sitting councillors, nobody from the council said anything at that meeting. And the context of the meeting was, although it's pitched as a site visit, the meeting was on site. So as is described to me, those invited turned up on site, heard the presentation around the proposals, and then the photograph was taken at the end of that. So the purpose was open, the meeting was open, and those who attended simply fulfilled their function as local members or potential local members, given the time and 3 days before the election, to go and to hear about the proposals to keep themselves informed. That does not contravene the code. The code would be contravened by any member who then goes on to the planning committee and who may have been seen to have acted in a prejudicial manner. If no one spoke and no one commented in support or otherwise, then there's no suggestion, I would think, that anybody had actually prejudged this. And it's on that basis that Councillor Crawford and Councillor Watts, and I would suggest Councillor McGee, are open to making a transparency statement to put the matter in the record, because we always want people to have confidence in the integrity of these proceedings, and it's for that purpose we're making, Councillor Crawford's made that statement, and I'm just providing that further context in the hope that everyone is quite clear. Where there was confirmation, if there is going to be a complaint in relation to last year, then that will be dealt with separately. What's the important for this planning committee is to make sure that we proceed from here in a manner which does not in any way, shape or form threaten to impair any decision taken today. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. Yep, Councillor McGee, you want to come in?
Aye, just for clarity, I also attended that meeting. I can't remember if it was by invitation by the company or if it was just by a former elected member who's interested, his great interest in his local area. And I was just attending just to see what was going on. As my recollection of the meeting was, we stood in a kind of circle at the Baron A-frame. There was a wee kind of presentation made of what their plans were, and there was a lot of folk for, I think it was Ochiltree Community Council, asked a lot of questions about traffic going through their area, and then there was other questions asked, but there was no message of support or otherwise for the proposals. It was just a kind of introduction as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McGee. And Councillor Watts?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for transparency with regards to the planning application 23049/PPP, on page 5 of our reports, I need to state that with Councillors Crawford and McGee as council candidates, I did attend an open public meeting in April 2022, arranged by the applicant. I feel that it's important to express the fact that no indication of my feelings with regards to this application were given by me or by Councillors McGee or Crawford at this public meeting or subsequently outside of a planning meeting arena. I can also confirm I have no financial or non-financial interest in this application. My interest is only as a ward councillor for Cumnock and New Cumnock.
Thanks, Councillor Watts. Any other declarations of interest? No. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to item 3 in the agenda, and that's planning up. Sorry, item 2 in the agenda is the hearing procedure. There's going to be no hearing procedure today. So we're going to move on to item 3. Apologies for that. So this is planning application number 23/0491/PPP, and it's an application for planning permission in principle for development of an eco-wellness park comprising self-containment accommodation units, not for permanent residence, reception building and associated wellness therapy, educational and leisure uses. And it's a resubmission of application 21/0778/PPP at former Barony Colliery, Barony Road, Auchinleck by Barony NP UK Limited. So I'm going to ask, David, do you want to come in?
Through you, Chair, just perhaps to assist, just a few very hopefully brief opening remarks before I hand over to Marion Ferguson here, planning colleague, who will present the detail of the report as the author. I think it's appropriate, though, as the recommendation before you today is in my name, just to give a little bit of context here. There's a line in the report, it's a very detailed report, and obviously members should be conversant with all of the issues, all of the report, and take a decision based on what you've read and what you hear today, and also any answers and responses to any points of clarification. What I would say is there is a line in there, as I said, that indicates or describes this as a complex proposal and a complex site, and I think that's a keystone to understanding the particular context here. It is a complex proposal. It's not just build houses in a field. Members are conversant with the detail, and it is a complex site because of its previous history. And again, it's rehearsed in detail in the report, and I won't go into that detail. But given we have a complex proposal and a complex site, there are other complicating factors which we just all have to deal with. There's no judgment being offered here. The facts are it's an application in principle, which affords a different level of detail with the submission than you would expect with a detailed application. It is zoned for leisure, so that's a starter for 10 in terms of any development proposals that in accordance with LDP2. And the LDP2 inquiry has now concluded. This report would have come to committee in December, but there was a delay from the reporter in issuing the LDP2 report, which came the week after that committee. And as is now referred to in the report, the reporter has upheld the designation of the site, so there's no change there. And that's an important factor as well in determining this application, which is in principle. As Marion will expand on and members will be aware of from having read the report, there are a whole range of issues due to the specific nature of this site and the way it has evolved since the mining operation ceased, and they will present significant challenges to the development of the site. The issue for the committee, in my view, would be that if there are matters which are established to be insurmountable, then that may lead to one conclusion. If, however, there are matters that appear challenging, but they could be addressed through further detailed submissions and consideration of all the flexible factors, such as design, such as location, layout, numbers of units, knock-on effect, number of car parking, where they'll go, methods of construction, impact on the ecology and environment, all those issues are laid out, and Marion will address them in detail. But the approach we have taken as your officers and the reason for the recommendation as it's presented is quite simply in recognition it is an application in principle, and while some of those issues will be significant challenges, we are of the view that in each instance we are not at a stage of supporting the conclusion that they cannot be overcome. Therefore, the recommendation reflects the context that it is an application in principle and absolutely recognises that there would be a lot more work to be done on the part of, or in respect to the next application and in the part of all parties in order to move this forward to any kind of final permission and any kind of consent for a development to be taken forward. That doesn't mean it can't be done. The view as set out there in the detail of the report is that the issues that have been rightly highlighted through the consultation process will be challenging, but may be capable of being addressed if they haven't already been. And it's on that basis that we come to the overall conclusion in the context of an application for permission in principle that we have. And I'll leave it at that just now, Chair. It's just to give that bit of context, hand you over to Marion, and then obviously there'll be the opportunity for members to ask questions and raise points of clarification before they move to determination. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. Yep, I'll hand over to Barry. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I'll do a presentation, but Marion is here as well as case officer for any detailed questions or points. So firstly, before starting the presentation, I just want to provide an update in respect of the SEPA consultation response. As noted in page 24 of the report, SEPA lodged a holding objection to the application in mid-December. This was a late response due to the misfiling of our consultation to them. The holding objection sought clarification on two matters. Firstly, the identification of groundwater-dependent terrestrial ecosystems within the site in relation to the master plan layout, and secondly, confirmation that there were no private water supplies within 250 metres of the site. The applicant submitted information to the Council and to SEPA in early January, just when we came back from Christmas break, to address those matters, and the report was written on the basis of an assumption that SEPA would withdraw their objection, and also noting the right to withdraw the report from the agenda should that not happen before today's meeting. I can, however, advise that SEPA have now responded and withdrawn their holding objections on both matters. This is subject to 3 conditions being attached. firstly, that no development shall take place within the flood risk area. Secondly, that site-specific hydraulic modelling of the Lugar water and its tributaries is undertaken at the detailed design stage. And thirdly, that a construction environmental management plan is submitted. The first of those conditions is covered by condition 2H in the report, which requires a detailed layout within any future detailed application to be accompanied and informed by a plan showing the flood risk area. And the third is covered by condition 1O, which requires the submission of the construction environmental management plan as one of the matters specified in conditions. In order to address the second condition, however, it is proposed that a further requirement under condition 2 is added, which would be part J, and it should state site-specific hydraulic modelling of Lugar water and its tributaries, so that the layout would require this to be accompanied by this information. So moving on to presentation, I'll just start the slideshow.
Chair, just before we go into that, Maureen can't get in. Just trying to.
Oh, thanks, Councillor. So Councillor Mackay is trying to join the meeting, but okay, we're going to resend the link to Councillor Mackay and hopefully she can join the meeting.
We'll just carry on then, anyway. Okay. So this slide shows the location of the site. You can see it's located approximately midway between Auchinleck to the east. Am I not sharing? No. Sorry. Apologies. It's going well today. Missed that vital part. Right. Start again. Okay, right, so this is the location of the site outlined in red. As you can see, it's located roughly midway between Ochiltree and Auchinleck. The Lugar water runs to the south of the site along this line. And we've got Dumfries Estate roughly in this area to the south and east. To the north is the Ayrshire chipboard factory in this location. This is a larger scale plan of the site. The Barony A-frame is located in this area, which is in grey, and it's out with the application site. So the area of the A-frame and the amenity grounds, including the bike track and so on, are all out with the application site. You can see here roughly the sort of line of the access track, which we walked along at the site visit yesterday, running down through the site, and eventually it goes zigzags down across a burn and into Dumfries Estate. And there is also a line of informal footpath as well along the top of the Bing. The site extends to approximately 46 hectares and is located to the former Barony, Colliery and Bing. The brownfield site has since rewilded and has become colonised by a mix of woodland and grassland, and is considered to be of a high biodiversity value, with a range of habitats, including the open mosaic habitat, which is priority habitat and host to a number of rare and conservation value flora, fauna and invertebrate species. The applicant's invertebrate survey considers the site to be of potential SSSI value. However, the site is not designated as such at present, nor does it have any other natural heritage designations affecting it. This shows just an aerial view of the site so that you can see in a bit more detail the sort of vegetation cover. So we get the Barony A-frame at the top here. This is the kind of, would have been the hard standing area of the colliery and its buildings. And this is moving into the scrub habitat in this area, and then more wooded towards the southern half of the site. But there are some localised clearings, for example, in this area here and on top of the Bing. This is the master plan layout, which was provided with the application. So as already stated, the application is for planning permission in principle for the development of an eco-wellness park comprising self-contained accommodation units, reception building and associated wellness, therapy, education and leisure uses. This is a resubmission of an application which was refused in February last year. The application has this time been submitted with an environmental impact assessment report, which assesses impacts on various matters, including ecology, ground conditions and the historic environment. The application was also submitted with a master plan, which is indicative only and intended to show how the development could take place. This shows the development of development zones around the site, but mainly in the mid to southern parts. So you can see the layout that's indicatively shown here, and this area here is almost left untouched apart from the provision of a car park and arrival building within the top left-hand corner. The application, indicative car park is proposed to the northwest. As noted within the report, it's considered that this would be significantly below the area needed to serve the whole development as it is proposed at present. The zones for development aim to be located roughly in less sensitive areas of the site and those out with the high risk stability areas. So just in terms of the indicative layout, they've shown 160 self-contained accommodation units. There's a hotel within this area here, a spa, yoga, dance studio, a cafe restaurant here. We've also got a landscape hub, which is for crafts, workshops, jewellery making, cosmetics, and ecologies hub in this area, which is flora and fauna and river management, educational aspect. You've got the Suds pond in this area here in the lower part of the site. So this just shows a comparison between the original master plan submitted with the refused application and the current one. You can see that as the area used is significantly reduced and are reduced into pockets of development rather than spread across the site. So the master plan layout has primarily been informed by the updated emerging mitigation strategy, which takes account of the ecological surveys undertaken. The red areas in the middle plan are noted as areas to avoid due to the presence of important habitats, vascular plants, invertebrates, dark wildlife corridors and potential bat roosts. The indicative master plan layout roughly aligns with those areas. However, there are still concerns that the master plan layout does not show all of the infrastructure which may be necessary for the development, including car parking, as noted earlier, as well as accesses for construction, drainage, etc. So this plan is based on the habitat survey, which is to the left there, which shows the areas of important habitats, including open mosaic habitat and the rush pasture areas. And this shows the master plan layout, which is quite faintly overlaying on to the constraints plan. So you can see the red area, which corresponds with the plan on the left to the top of the site. The green area here and to the lower part as well, and the yellow area, which there is some development on it, but it's proposed that there'll be further survey work to inform any development within this. This is another plan which is from the design and access statement. So this also shows the layout of the buildings within it. And the red hatching area is the area which is proposed to be retained for invertebrates, and it's recommended that a minimal number of buildings and buildings on this and walkways should be raised where possible. The purple hatched areas are key areas for vascular plants and badgers, and it's proposed to minimise the width of access roads and not tarmac surface. So we do actually have the indicative car parking area within this, and also the suds area. The red shade is important habitat areas, including low quality rush pasture, which is proposed to minimise. It's proposed to minimise development and minimise impact in those areas. And the blue circle here is a structure with a potential for bat roosting, and there would be no development within a 30-metre buffer zone around it. The darker green areas are dark wildlife corridors, mainly concentrated around the edges of the site, and there would be no lighting within those areas. And the lighter green areas are habitat areas to be managed, and any buildings within the areas to be on stilts. And the orange areas are the less important quality areas, concentrated development, and development would be concentrated within those areas. And further survey at detail stage will be undertaken to avoid the loss of quality trees. So this shows the master plan layout overlaying on the plan of high risk stability areas and the buffer zones, which are in the lighter shade of red. These are to the areas where there are steep slopes. This, however, doesn't show that some of the proposed accesses would be within some of these zones. Accesses aren't quite a high risk receptor as buildings would be, but we still expect remediation works to be undertaken and to be shown within any future application for access tracks cutting across these areas. This shows the master plan area with the access routes on it. The purple dotted line is based on the existing access route that's there at present, and this would be the main HGV and service access. The green dotted lines are intended to be raised boardwalks to be used by pedestrians and electric vehicles within the site only. This slide shows the allocation of the site within the local development plan. The site is allocated for leisure and recreation uses or business, industrial or storage uses. So the proposal therefore in principle accords with this allocation. And this shows the allocation within LDP2, which is a significant consideration now that the plan has been through the examination. The Scottish Government reporter has not proposed any substantive changes to the allocation. And for some historic background, this is an image of the western side of the Bing and the colliery. This was taken in 1990, I believe. I thought it was earlier than that, but apparently it's 1990, just as the colliery closed and some of the buildings were starting to be demolished. It just shows the steep sides, just without the vegetation being on it. So it's just quite interesting to see how it looks because the vegetation kind of conceals some of the steepness of the slopes. This is a drone image taken, this is from Google Maps, and it was taken roughly from the northern part of the site. So you can see the Barony Road running along here, the A-frame, and then the Bing extending in this location. So you can see the sort of open grass pasture area in the foreground, more in the foreground, and then it becoming more wooded. So from a distance, it does blend in fairly well to landscape. And a view of the Bing itself, looking down onto the rush pasture area, into the scrub, and then into the wooded area. And this is the access track running along the side of it and down to the south and into Dumfries Estate. And this is a third part farm to the right hand side. Some photos, this is looking east with the site on the right hand side. And looking west towards Ochiltree and the site on the left hand side. The existing access into the Barony A-frame, as you can see there, and the access that's proposed would be beyond that into this wooded area here. And you can see the tall trees within just beyond the existing car park. This is where the proposed indicative car parking area is. So that would mean the loss of those trees if that were to happen. So this is within the grounds of the A-frame itself. And looking back from some of the hard standings of the colliery back towards the A-frame. And again, this is likely to be the colliery area, and looking north towards, you can see the log pile there at the Ayrshire factory. And looking south towards into the Bing. And looking back from the Rush pasture area, I think this is indicatively where the a hotel was shown within the master plan, along with accommodation units and a reception building. And again, within the open Rush pasture area on top of the Bing. And looking towards the scrub area and the wooded area to the south. This is the access track that runs along the western side of the Bing. You can see the steep sides of it here, and also going down to the right hand side as well. And again, with the birch and willow trees. This is one of the sides of the Bing which is never vegetated, strangely, so you can see the kind of original appearance of it. And looking down towards into Fries Estate. And again, and this is looking down to the western side of the Bing. This is just one of the sort of clearing areas that are within the wooded areas to the south of the Bing. And again, I think this is on top of the Bing, so this is one of the higher parts of it. Yep, this is on top of the Bing as well, looking down towards the De Vries Estate buildings, I think are just in the distance. And this is the kind of steep zigzag path that runs down across a burn and into the De Vries Estate. And the steep sides to the south. And looking back again towards the Ayrshire factory. This is just after the footpath and access had been resurfaced, so it's much easier to walk on now. That concludes the photographs. So, as previously noted, the application seeks planning permission principle for eco-wellness park development that comprise accommodation units, ancillary leisure and education uses. The application has been accompanied by an indicative master plan layout which attempts to show how the site would be developed, avoiding the most sensitive habitats and areas of unstable ground. However, as has been explained in various parts of the report, the proposed development is likely to require more extensive consequential development than is shown. For example, car parking, construction access, drainage infrastructure, etc. It's therefore possible that the development may have more adverse impacts than is shown in a master plan. Importantly, however, notwithstanding the indicative layout shown, the applicant has submitted information on the ecological value and ground conditions of the site, albeit those are limited, such that we now have information which helps to inform a judgment on the proposal and the potential areas that could be developed, as well as help to inform potential conditions. In particular, the emerging ecological mitigation strategy can be used to form a basis for a detailed layout. As noted in the report, there is a lack of fully informed detail of impacts on biodiversity mitigation enhancement measures, which is required by MPF4 Policy 3. This is partly due to the principal nature of the proposal, and in order to fully inform biodiversity impacts, mitigation enhancements, the detailed layout and design is required, and this would come forward in a future application. Measures provided in the application appear to be fairly ill-informed and not site-specific. However, it's also considered that a lack of detail on biodiversity mitigation enhancement does not necessarily affect the principle of the development, as there is no reason to suggest that the appropriate site-specific measures cannot be demonstrated within a future detailed application, particularly given the size of the site and the ability to provide mitigation enhancement on areas of the site not affected by development. It is acknowledged that the proposed development will have an impact on nature and biodiversity. However, overall, the recommendation is finely balanced and is for approval. This is primarily on the basis of the site allocation for the use proposed and the economic benefits of the proposal, as well as the ability to control aspects of a future detailed application through the attachment of conditions. Conditions start at page 124 of the report. Condition 1 sets out the matters under A to T, which are reserved for a future application. This includes the layout, design, landscaping, details of tree loss, lighting, phasing, details of biodiversity measures, construction environmental management plan, details of the appointment of an ecological clerk of works, and updated surveys, amongst other items, which you'll see in the condition. Conditions 2 to 10 set out more detail of what is required under condition 1. In particular, condition 2 requires several surveys and plans in order to inform the detailed layout. This includes the strategic ecological mitigation strategy, which should be updated from the one which was submitted with the current application. As previously noted, there is a lack of car parking provision in the indicative master plan for the scale of the development indicatively proposed. Any future detailed applications submitted under condition 1 would require to show car parking in it, and this would require to show the necessary provision of parking for the scale and form of development that comes forward, as well as to show how it would avoid the sensitive areas shown on a mitigation plan. For those reasons, it is not considered that the current lack of provision should affect the ability to grant planning permission in principle. So overall, the balanced judgment is that the proposal is in accordance with the development plan. Accordance is taken of the material considerations, including the representations, consultation responses. However, they are not considered to be of weight to suggest refusal of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florrie, for taking us through that presentation. It was well put together. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to open up to members for discussion or questions for Barry or any other plan department. Yep. Councillor Maitland.
A quick question, Barry. There was I've forgotten the page number actually, but it was about how this has to be for temporary accommodation only. Is there actually a time limit in what constitutes temporary accommodation? So would it be somebody couldn't visit for more than 3 months, or someone could live there for a year in temporary accommodation? I just wondered if there was an actual limit to it.
There isn't any limit, but it's for non-permanent residential accommodation. It's holiday accommodation. In the description. So that would limit it to that particular use rather than being a permanent dwelling house.
I think, without being glib, I know what you're referring to, obviously, in terms of caravans sites, for instance, but that's where people come and take long-term lets of the units. This would be more akin, I think, to, how many weeks can you spend at Centre Parks before you comply? Well, when you look at the cost of a week's let, it'd be a lot less than you might wish to. So I think we can look at that, but it wouldn't need to be defined. The commercial model would be that these would be people coming for short-term lets. There wouldn't be any question. It's necessary to clarify for the public permission, but I don't think the commercial model would see any intent of anybody moving on there in any kind of semi-permanent basis. I think the idea is to have different visitors, short-term lets, and turnover of clientele. But again, it would be looked at and could be ironed out, but I don't think there's any real issue there. It's not akin to a caravan park. You wouldn't be having, I don't think the model is to have return visitors, people coming with their own unit like a caravan site. So, but it's normally about 10 months of the year, I think, in relation to caravans as a comparison. I know that from the legal manager who used to have one down at Stranraer.
Members, anybody else? Yep. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Chair. I note that the first condition, point I, details of the appointment of an ecological clerk of works is there. I'm concerned because of the sort of generic ecological survey that was done initially for this application. So what I'm interested in knowing is how do we ensure that that is a suitably qualified ecological clerk of works? So what sort of direction can we give to the applicant there?
There is another condition which requires which sets out the detail of what we would want to see in the appointment of the ecological clerk of works, or ECOW for short. So condition 10 is what I would refer you to. So it refers back to condition 1U. So respect of condition 1 part 2U of the ecological clerk of works role shall be a full-time position undertaken by one person or by a team. By the terms of appointment they shall, and it sets out what we're requiring them to do. So it would be monitor compliance with the ecological and hydrological commitments provided in the EIA report, the approved construction environmental management plan, including the approved breeding bird protection plan and approved habitat management plan and approved species management plan and approved species protection plan within their remit. So that sets out the detail of what we would be expecting them to do, and they would be reporting to the council as well as the developer.
Just to supplement that in terms of the specific question, that in condition 10 rightly sets out what we'd expect them to do, but the whole reason of having a requirement for any applicant to tell us who that ecological clerk of works is going to be is so that we can be satisfied that they are suitably qualified to discharge the duties in 10. So that's why you have it twice. So the first point is tell us who it will be so we can be satisfied they can do this, and then you've got the clarity of what they'll be asked to do. But they do need to be suitably qualified, and there's there's recognised institutes and qualifications, etc. So they can't just be anyone fulfilling the role. They need to be suitably qualified, and that's why we have the sign off and appointment as well as a condition that then directs what we would expect that suitably qualified person to undertake on behalf of the applicant.
Thanks, David. Yep, Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. It's actually two questions. So the first one is on the suds ponds, and at paragraph 34, page 12, it states that it's actually proposed in an area that is sensitive and that we would be looking to reserve. So I wanted to know if that condition has been captured adequately, which is on the condition on page 125. So I was looking for some confidence in that. Page 125, about 3/4 of the way down. Because it looks like they'd have to relocate.
Well, yeah, we do realise that the SUDS is within an area which is a more sensitive area. So there probably will be limited locations where a SUDS pond can go, just because it will have to be in one of the lower areas of the site. So it may well have to go in within this area. However, we are looking for further survey work and remediation work to be done throughout. The conditions require that to be done, and for the site design to take account of all of those things. So it isn't a final location for the suds pond or a final design, but we would need them to provide more detail of how any impacts would be mitigated. That's kind of part of the issue with a lot of the sites, is that there are some parts of development as shown that are located within sensitive areas, including the car park and the SUDS area. And we need them to provide more work on how the impacts would be mitigated.
So what I'm asking, and I think you've answered, is do we have the confidence that we can mitigate against this on a future application? Because you mentioned earlier, which I thought was interesting, was that there may be further adverse effects that we don't know about until, you know, a proper plan came in as opposed to a plan in principle. So I'm concerned that we capture everything within the conditions where we can here. If not, it would be captured, imagine, at a later date. So the SUDS one, I'm quite satisfied. Can I ask the next question, if that's okay? And it's on the parking and the coaches, and I understand it's in the conditions there, but one of the things that wasn't mentioned is the electrical vehicles that they'll be using to transport people around. We don't know what size they are. They'll need to be stored somewhere. They'll need to be charged somewhere. And I was hoping that that would be captured again within the first conditions there, Kevin. If not, is that something that we could add in? What happens to these electrical vehicles? Where are they kept? How are they charged? Thank you.
Maybe answer that, Councillor. We do reserve this under Part 1, 2B, so there is reference there to the details of the car park, and including of electric vehicles. So it is one of these ones where it is an in-principle application. We have all these general ideas and proposals of what the applicant wants to do, but the detail behind it's not fully there. So it's about drilling down to that, and that's really what the next stage is for. So we think we've captured it in terms of looking for that information. It will then be for the applicant taking account of the various suite of things that we're looking for at the next stage to balance all that out and present something that fits within the remit of what we're given permission for. So it is challenging. There's a lot of different things going on in this site, as David mentioned at the start. It's a complex development on a complex site. The next stage will develop that detail, but there's no reason to say that they couldn't do it. We think with confidence that there is enough space and so on the site, but it may not look precisely like the development that they've laid out indicatively, because they'll have to balance all of these things out, and space is clearly going to be finite around about the various ecological and other challenges that they're going to have. So that's going to inform that future layout, but we think we've captured that and looking for that at a later stage. So it's absolutely reasonable. It is a thing that we think they'll need to detail, but it will be for the next stage.
Through you, Chair, if it helps members generally, I think the way to look at this is, can we give you confidence on the particular issue? No, but fundamentally that's because there's no certainty at the moment where anything is going. Can we give you confidence that there will only be one of two outcomes? Yes, and those two outcomes are, if this were approved today, that on the further submissions being received, either there will be sufficient detail there, be it on the SUDs, the electric vehicles, and we can include that under what we used to call reserved matters at the beginning, if you wish. But on any of these issues, the confidence you can take is that either there will be sufficient information that it will come back to this committee with a recommendation that reflects that, or there won't be sufficient information, or there'll be all the information we need, but that information leads to the conclusion that the impacts of any proposal at that stage are such that we could not recommend approval. So the confidence is that the conditions are worded and sufficient to allow the developer the opportunity to proof the pudding, if you like, and bring forward one set of final proposals. This is what we're looking to build. That'll allow us then to either get to a position of confidence, whether it's the SUDs or any other issues, that they can be addressed. But if we're not that satisfied at that stage, it'll be a different recommendation. I think the key point in terms of process is all of this will come back in that detail to this committee. It won't be dealt with by officers under delegation in terms of the normal arrangements. Those further, the application to discharge all the conditions in Part 1 there will come back to this committee. So you're not even having to rest on our judgment at a later date. You're simply going to get a further report like this, setting out what the detail is, what our assessment of it is, whether or not we are supportive of it from the planning service point of view, and ultimately the final decision about whether or not the planning authority is confident on the final proposals and the detail of the final proposals will sit again with this committee.
Yep, Councillor Maitland.
Just say thank you, David, for that explanation. I did want to clarify, I was talking about the wee electrical buggies as opposed to electrical cars. And I think what we are here today is to find the confidence in this. And I think that we should have a good discussion on the conditions in here. Thank you.
And through you, Jim, what I was saying is I wouldn't bring Kevin. It's not really for Kevin to comment on electric vehicles. However, it is another issue. They will have an impact going round. And as I say, if that, I've not got right page in front of me, but we can include that. If that's a decision of the committee, we can include the further proposals around electric vehicles within the Part 1 matters.
Thanks, David. I'm going to bring in Councillor Filson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a wee bit of clarification. I was looking for page 51, 117, paragraph 117. It's saying the applicant's blatantly lying here. I was just wondering, do they own the Loch Fitty St Ninian site? I worked up there for 5 years in a previous employment. And it was a well-restored open cast with a beautiful lock at the bottom of it. This application would really fit nicely in there, so I was really wanting to ask the applicant, who's not here, why they chose the Barney site over this application, if that was possible.
So, well, two things. One, the applicant and the agent are actually here, but in terms of statutory process, because the objectors did not insist on the right to a hearing, there is no hearing. What I would also say is it is set out there in terms of their choosing, but it is their commercial right to choose which site to bring forward, and we need to deal with this application on its merits in relation to this site. There's certainly no other alternative site in our locality, and I think that's it. People might think, well, that would have been preferable, but it doesn't translate into or affect the determination of the proposals we do have.
But they do own the Loch Fitty site, do they? St Ninians?
I've no reason to believe they haven't. That's what they've told us. I haven't checked it land register, but the applicant would not tell us that if it wasn't the case. So I'm absolutely confident they do, and I think they're actually nodding to confirm they do.
You happy with that, Councillor? Yep, thanks. Councillor McGee.
I thought, Ken, we had a good site visit the other day. I thought that was worthwhile, and I think the photographs also helped in the presentation. And I noticed, Ken, we've got a lot of conditions on, but I still want to ask a couple of questions just regarding the car parking, because it seems, Ken, there's quite a discrepancy in the car parking proposed and the car parking that would be required. And again, this is in principle. We know that, but it seems quite a bit of work to kind of square that circle, so to speak. And the other question was the access, open access during construction, because it is that site's not just been left to go. Ken, there's been a lot of work done at the Barney, the A-frame, the memorial and different things, and there are a lot of paths there. And I see it kind of is in conditions, but I'm just wondering, kind of is a well-used site. I'm just hoping that that will be open during the access, and again, that's quite a difficult thing to do. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McGee. I don't know if anybody wants to make a comment on that or the planning.
I think certainly on the first one, that's the car parking's an issue. It's out the paper. Nobody's suggesting it isn't, but it goes back to the fact that it's an application in principle, and I know people will probably shortly getting fed up hearing that, but it is an application in principle, and that's absolutely important to the determination, because what it means is, because it's in principle, you don't actually have in front of you the final proposal in terms of the number of units. You don't have the location of the units. We don't have the size and the specification of the units. And that's not a criticism, that's fact, because it's an application in principle, so you wouldn't expect it. So because you don't have that, you actually don't know how many car parking spaces they will need, because the final iteration of the proposal and the final numbers of units, etc., will determine that final number of car parks. What this paper does and the recommendation does is recognise, one, positively, the site is big enough to accommodate it all with the right design, but until the right design's in front of you, you can't really comment on it. I think the applicant knows and is well aware and accepts the content of the report and the conditions and what they would have to do around about that. But remember, they have other variables such as the numbers and locations of the units and how they're going to deliver it. It will be challenged. I referred to that earlier, and I'm not trying to be positive or negative. It's a fact that it will be a challenge, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a challenge that can't be met. But that detail, as before, will come back to the committee with our assessment of it, but ultimately the final decision on whether or not those final proposals are acceptable will sit back with us as committee. And in terms of the second one, we're going into detail, as members all know, there will be a specific plan for the construction phase on any development, should it be consented next time around, this time around, next time around. There will be that element and that ability to control the arrangements for construction, traffic access and egress, and maintaining as far as possible, the open path network during the construction phase. And that will be in the proposals that will come back as well.
Thanks, David. That's something that I share. Councillor McGee's concerns over the car parking and what area that would have to move to. I mean, the site is complex, and my concern is the only place that the car park can go is into that high diversity, biodiversity area. Do we feel the conditions are strong enough that protects that north of the site from construction traffic and/or placing the car park in that area?
The conditions are sufficient to require the applicant to come back with all the information you would need to get to that degree of confidence before anything's consented that would allow, a sod to be cut on the site. So the conditions don't give the end result you would wish. The conditions create the pathway to the submission of the further information, the further assessment and the further report that should then give the confidence at that stage. And if it doesn't, then it takes you to a different conclusion at that stage.
David?
Just to add to that, Chair, we did raise this with the applicant, and they offered a few different options of potential solutions in the future that's open to them. Areas of the site, including the area in red, that would be subject to those detailed surveys and whatever impacts there might be. But they also mentioned about off-site parking and things as well. That maybe would be subject to separate applications if they needed to pursue that, and I don't know what options they have in that respect, but there's other things that they can potentially do to help that. So it's not solely related to the site or the area in red. They may have options within the site and out with the site to try and deliver this as well, but ultimately that will be for them to prove what they can do when they bring forward the detail.
Thanks very much. I think it's really important, especially look at the environmental impact assessment. It's like we don't accidentally cause a kind of ecological disaster in this area. That any conditions protect.
Yeah.
Right.
I've never seen as much detail in an outline plan and permission in 20 years I've been in planning.
That's good, but it means we've got a lot of information that we can take on board and make a decision on. Councillor Maitland.
I just want absolute clarification that no work can take place until a full plan comes forward. Is that correct?
My understanding, but over to the planner. Anything that would take place would be only either permitted development that could take place regardless under the permitted development regulations. Other than that, and obviously any further site investigations, etc., required. But no, this is purely permission in principle. And as I keep saying, the other side of it is an indicative layout, so there is no conclusion here that would allow anything to be built on the back of this process. What this does is the permission in principle process flushes out the issues, and we've been successful in that collectively, and it allows the applicant in any situation to take that away and assess for themselves what is their ability to come back with the detailed submissions to address those issues. So if the decision were to accept the recommendation today, it then sits with the applicant to come back with further submissions that address these issues, and that's what we then deal with at that stage. But there is no risk of anything being built in the interim because permission in principle doesn't allow that. So the only things that could happen in site would either already be capable of happening under permitted development or particular specific site investigations, drilling, that kind of a thing, but only to carry out the inquiries to inform the next submission.
If I can just add to that, there is a requirement to control some of the site investigations as well under condition 1.2n, which is to inform the construction environmental management plan. We've added that in because on complex and difficult sites, we've sometimes found that the actual site investigation itself can be quite disruptive. So we have a degree of control over that for certainly the more serious investigation works, so that we know how that's going to be controlled in practice of they go on site, they do these in with the kind of lightest touch to minimise impact, so that then informs the detailed assessments that come forward. So there's an extra degree of control, but if there is permitted development rights available, they're able to do some things without our consent, but they won't be able to start on anything substantive until they have the further permissions in place.
Thanks, David. Is there any other further comments or questions for the planning department at this stage? Are we at a position where we can move to determination? Oh, I've had Councillor Maitland nod first next.
I would suggest we go with the recommendations, and I would like to add in the condition on the electrical buggies. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Maitland. Councillor McGee.
I am happy to second that. Yep.
Thank you very much. Is there any other?
I would move against that.
So you're moving refusal with the application?
No. Just Councillor Crawford's moving grant, but without the additional element of including the conditioning around the electric vehicle submissions being included in what we would have called the reserved matters. The difference between the two proposals is, on Councillor Maitland's proposal, that would mean that the further submission of electric vehicles would need to come back to committee, and on Councillor Crawford's proposal, those further submissions would still need to come in, but they would be dealt with under officers. So that's the difference between the two proposals, is whether the further submission does come. And what I would say it would be that if the committee is minded that it also wishes to have oversight for the same reasons that the use of and the plans for the vehicles may also have an impact, and how are they going to go through the pathways, etc., about impacting around that, then if it's a legitimate consideration of the committee to include that particular condition along with other main ones, then that's Councillor Maitland's proposal, and Councillor Crawford's proposal is not to treat the electric vehicles in that way. So it's a motion to approve with an additional recommendation beyond what's in the paper, and it's a motion to approve per the recommendation. It's whether or not there are seconders for either.
And just for clarity, we've also got the two SEPA conditions that Barry mentioned, but so we'd be voting on that as well.
Right.
Yeah. So Councillor Crawford, do you have a seconder for your
I'll
motion?
second Councillor Crawford.
Sorry, Mr. Boswell, I'm very, very sorry, but this is a statutory process following the planning legislation. I'm aware you've expressed interest in this application. I'm also aware my colleagues explained to you, you have not submitted any representation or objection. You are not a party to the process, and I have to advise the chair and the committee that unfortunately they are not able to hear you speak. And I know my colleagues have advised you that, so I'm sorry, Mr. Boswell. I know refusal often offends, but the committee cannot legally accommodate you. I'm sorry.
Members, just before we move to the vote, can I just clarify that both the motion and the amendment in terms of the approval of the application also includes the additional condition that Barry had mentioned at the start with regards to condition 2, and including a part J with regards to site-specific hydraulic modelling of the Lugar water? Councillor Crawford? That's fine. Councillor Maitland? Yep, thank you.
We're going to move to vote this. Councillor McGee.
Councillor Crawford.
Just for clarification, members, the motion is by Councillor Maitland to approve the application as per the conditions in the report, and in addition to condition 2, part J with regards to the Lugar water, and the condition with regards to the electrical buggies, and that has been seconded by Councillor McGee. The amendment by Councillor Crawford is to move the recommendations and the conditions as per the report, including the additional condition, the additional condition for part of condition 2, part J, with regards to the site-specific hydraulic modelling of the Lugan water, and that has been seconded by Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify because as members will see at page 124, the actual recommendation in terms of the duration of the consent and matters specified by conditions, there is already reference at Roman numeral 2b, that the overall site layout, including details of roads, footpaths and other accesses, car parking, including for electric vehicles and cycle parking and any other areas of hard standing. I'm just clarifying my officers. I think that wording was originally intended to refer to electric vehicles coming for the car parking because of the charging issue we now all need to deal with. And for clarity, Councillor Maitland's proposal is that any proposals in respect of the use of the electric buggies, not electric cars, but electric buggies around there, like the golf cart type scenario, to get people to their accommodation, should also simply be included there for completeness. That is the only point of difference between the original motion and Councillor Crawford's amendment, which is not to include the buggies alongside everything else that's required. But my understanding is that obviously the submission in the buggies will still need to come forward with any further application, and it will still come back to committee regardless. I don't know if we're dancing in the head of a pin here, to be honest. With all respect to all members, and I appreciate members are simply trying to get this right, as we have for 12 months. But I'm not actually sure there's much of a difference, because colleagues are advising me that the submissions on the electric buggies will still be part of the overall submission coming back, and they will still need to be satisfactory. And if they're not, they'll still come back to committee anyway. So I don't know that there's any difference between the two before we go to what might be perhaps an unnecessary vote.
Councillor Maitland, do you still want to push forward your motion on that basis?
Looking at the wording there at 1B, electric vehicles, I would say would cover the buggies as well. So I'm quite happy to withdraw that amendment, but still put forward my motion for the recommendations, including the SEPA recommendations, if that's the correct procedure. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think then, so for you, I think, Councillor Crawford, there's no difference between yours and therefore there's no need for the vote.
So you're withdrawing? Yeah. Okay.
Second.
Go ahead, Councillor McGrath. So if there's nobody else otherwise minded, I think go with the recommendation. Okay.
So I think just for conclusion then through you, Chair, the application has been approved in principle as per the report and the recommendations, and the outcome of that is there will require to be at some future point further detailed submissions in relation to all of what we will call the reserved matters, and they will be the subject of a report back to this committee at a future date with our assessment of that and a further recommendation at that time to the committee. And thanks, Chair, and thanks, members.
Yep.
Sorry.
Just want to clarify that it's plus the 2D.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Chair, just to clarify, David is correct, and that includes the additional condition 2, part J, regarding the modelling for Lugan water. Thank you.
Thank you very much for attendance, members, and a safe journey home. Thanks.